Right. So introduction, history of writing. So writing is the physical manifestation of a spoken language. So writing is definitely how we write, how we actually talk and communicate. So it is how we actually place what we are saying. Okay, so it is a writing system that people used to read. So there are a lot of writing systems in the world. It is also a way for people to record events and preserve them. So before, people actually just use pictures to record events and preserve them. And after that, a few years later, a few centuries later, people were able to invent writing system. So why is reading important? So reading gets your mind working across different areas. So for starters, it involves comprehension to process the words you read. So with comprehension, of course, you must have a wide vocabulary. So that means it's very important that you read so that you also develop your vocabulary. So even if you don't understand what that means, if you do read well, you do read a lot of books and then pick up a dictionary and then search for that word, you will be able to understand what you are actually reading. Or even with if you study other languages and then you read those words as well, you will be able to understand at least a few languages if you do uh, try to learn them. So, for example, if you try to learn the Japanese language or the Korean language or maybe the Chinese or Spanish, Italian, whatever, whatever language, if you do try to read their languages or listen to what they are saying, you will be able to understand those words. So, once again, having a wide vocabulary is also very important as a person if you wanted to develop yourselves. And so, beyond that, you can use your analytical abilities, stimulate memories, and even broaden your imagination by reading words off a page. So, by reading, of course, the difference between watching stories and reading stories, when you're watching stories, you are visually looking at what you are. Uh, you are visually seeing the story. Even so, with reading stories, your screen is your brain or your mind. So you are able to imagine what you are reading if you do also have a wide vocabulary. Most of the time, some people, whenever you hear some book readers say, uh, that's not how I imagine things. Of course, because are books are completed by our own imagination. So sometimes our imagination and the interpretation of those films will definitely be different because the director and your imagination are two different people. Okay? So reading is also an exercise in empathy, an exercise in walking someone else's shoes for a while. So definitely, if you're going to read stories or literature, any other forms of writing, uh, you are reading someone else's perspective. Okay, so now let's discuss the history of writing. So written language, however, does not emerge until its invention in Sumer, southern Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia is one of those first civilizations in our world. Okay, circa 3,500 to 3,000 BCE or before Common Era. So this early writing was called cuneiform and consisted of making specific marks in wet clay with a reed implement. And then the writing system of the Egyptians was already in use before the rise of the early dynastic period, circa 3150 before Common Era, and is thought to have developed from Mesopotamian cuneiform, though this theory is disputed and came to be known as hieroglyphic. Okay. So history is impossible without the written word, as one would lack context in which to interpret physical evidence from the ancient past, as historians used the writing system to record the events at their time. If you hear about people, like the historians are the ones who record history. Okay, so of course, there are historians who definitely record the events that happened at their time. Okay. Okay. Pictographs, symbols which represented objects. So those are pictographs. So our ancient, the very ancient people just use pictographs. They just draw those that they observe, as you can see, before writing systems came about. The only thing that our ancient, very ancient people, those who had lived in the Stone era and also in the Bronze era, they usually just use these pictographs. After that is cuneiform. So this is one of the earliest writing systems in our world. So it is a Sumerian writing system. Then hieroglyphics. So this is another ancient, one of the most ancient writing systems that had happened in our world. So it is the Egyptians that created this writing system. So it is almost like also a pictograph. And then in the scripts, so in the scripts is Indian script. And then we also have our own writing system in our country before the Spanish era or the Spanish regime started. So Baybayin or Alibata is an ancient Filipino writing system. So if you remember our own ancestors, write this Baybayin on leaves or on stones and also on bark. So that's where our ancient people write this Baybayin. So abakada igahalamana nga pa rasata ouwa. Yeah. So that's how our ancient people write uh, our very unique writing system before Spain arrived in our country. Even so, most of what our ancestors wrote before were destroyed by the Spaniards. And also some have, of course, rotten, and we still have that paper back when the Spaniards came in our country. Okay. And also some of the Spaniards thought that whatever was written out there was done due to witchcraft. Then another ancient Indian writing system is the Brahmic script. And then Korean alphabet. So this is also one of the earliest writing systems in our world. So they actually call this Hangul. And then Japanese lettering system. This is also an example of ancient lettering systems that up until now they still use. Even so, katakana had started when foreign languages started to get inside their uh, language as well. And then I wasn't just able to place the kanji here because it is a Mandarin lettering system that they also use. So it is inspired by the Chinese system. So pinyin is Chinese or the Mandarin lettering system. Anyway, the Mandarin writing system is too complicated for me to place here because there's just a lot of letters in pinyin. Okay, so hiragana and katakana and then kanji. Okay, so now we're done with the writing systems. So let's discuss difference between fiction and non-fiction. Of course, whenever we say fiction, it is from people's imagination. Meanwhile, non-fiction is one of those that aren't from imagination, and usually they just place fact. So fiction, fantasy, humor, adventure, mystery, horror, folk tales, fairy tales, realistic fiction, historical fiction, and then science fiction. With fiction as well, we also do have genres like tragedy and comedy. Then non-fiction, biography, autobiography, narrative non-fiction, newspapers, magazines, research journals, travelogues, self-help book, textbook, and then reference book. So that's the difference between fiction and non-fiction. With fiction, again, it is from the author's imagination. Meanwhile, non-fiction is all about facts or truth. Now, difference between journalism and literature. Journalism, so the technique is informative. So with journalism, its goal is to inform its readers. Meanwhile, in literature, the technique is aesthetic, or it is art, of course. Its goal is to create an art or a story. Even so, with journalism, it can also use literature means of style and narrative technique, but always to tell the truth. For example, they can place stories that they do some kind of documentary. So if you're going to watch documentaries with some kind of literature style, dramatic style, for example, if you're going to watch some kind of autobiographies, for example, Magpakailanman, it's also a journalistic style using literature means as well. And then it uses, meanwhile, literature, it uses means of style and narrative techniques to create a new world of joy, of sadness, of human value. And then with journalism, the journalist chooses a point of view. Even so, with literature, the writer may choose many point of views. He does not need to be committed to any ideology. And then with journalism, the journalist works for a newspaper that has an ideology. The journalist can also not just work for a newspaper, they can work for networks like ABS-CBN, GMA Network, CNN, BBC, and etc. Meanwhile, the writer may have to make some concessions to his editors if he wants his book published. Even so, at our time right now, with literature, we also do have this traditional publishing and self-publishing. With self-publishing, uh, there are writers who don't pretty much need to consent with his or her editors. For example, people who choose to edit their own books and then publish it online, like in Amazon, KDP. Wattpad, and etc. Okay, thank you.